Juan, this is the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley, and we are excited every week to bring you stories of innovation, education, and entrepreneurship, especially as it relates to service. Service around the world, service above self. That's the motto of Rotary International. And 1.2 million Rotarians worldwide and about 34,000 clubs are all looking for cool ways to make their communities and the larger world a better place. And so what we do in our meetings each week is we anchor them with a presentation from someone who is doing something wildly interesting and cool somewhere. And this week we've got Jessica and, actually, Jessica, pronounce your last name for me.
Tribbe.
Tribbe. All right, good. I didn't talk to you as Jessica, and I could mangle her name. No. So at any rate, so Jessica Tribbe is in Copenhagen in Denmark, and she works with UNICEF and their product innovation team. And so she has spent time in Kenya, in Uganda, really looking to see how different things that UNICEF makes happen in those communities can be done better. Are these things going well? She's going to tell you about this in gory detail. I don't need to keep going. But I will add that Jessica is the proud daughter of a longtime Rotarian. So I'm sure that when she says, I presented to a Rotary club, and he says, tell me about the club, and he's thinking, everybody sat around tables with chicken and veggies and things like that. And she'll say, it was the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley. And he'll say, really? So Jessica's father, find us every week at siliconvalleyrotary.com. There you go. With that, I want to pass this over to Jessica. Jessica, you have got a wonderful story to tell us, and I am looking forward to hearing it. So it is to you.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be with you all today, and this is a very, very different experience from the Rotary meetings that I went to growing up as a little kid. So very, very exciting. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, if I can. Okay, how's that? Can you all see first slide?
Looking good.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the work of UNICEF Innovation, which is really, yep.
We're getting the 2 bits again.
Are you getting the 2 again? Let's just see if we can do it. How about that?
That is perfect. Go right ahead.
Okay, great. So today I'm going to talk about the work of UNICEF and our innovation teams. And UNICEF is, of course, a very large organization that I'm sure many of you are already familiar with, working for children and the rights of children around the world. Just before I get too far into things, I'll just give you a quick background about myself. So I am currently a project consultant based with the innovation team here in Copenhagen. I just came here about a year ago after spending a little over a year and a half in Kenya and Uganda, where I was doing testing of innovation products in the field with users and local governments. And prior to that, I was doing my master's in public policy based in Paris. So a little bit of information just about UNICEF and what we do. I think many of you probably know UNICEF from either the Christmas ornaments or the Halloween boxes that you've seen around, and the various charity campaigns around UNICEF. And you probably know that we focused on children's rights, education for children, health for children, among other things. But what probably a lot of people don't know is that the E in UNICEF is actually an acronym, and the E in UNICEF actually stands for Children's Emergency Fund. So a lot of what we do also revolves around emergency response. So we're very active with our other UN partners, UNHCR among others, in places like Syria. We're extremely active in the Ebola response in West Africa over the last few years, and a number of other conflict and disaster situations around the world. Just to talk a little bit about innovation within UNICEF, being that many of you are located in Silicon Valley, you've probably run into some of my colleagues who are also based in San Francisco, working in the sort of startup scene and trying to connect with partners for UNICEF in San Francisco. We also have a team in Nairobi and one in New York, and their main focus is on technology and software for UNICEF context. We have a network of labs around the world based in our country offices, And then finally, we have the innovation unit that I work for, which is based in UNICEF's supply division, focusing specifically on products for UNICEF. And when I say products, I mean things that we can actually pick up and throw, tangible products. So I think many people probably don't realize what a big role a UN organization like UNICEF plays when it comes to supplies and logistics. But we have quite a huge operation, especially a very large one based here in Copenhagen, which might seem a little bit strange. But we happen to be, we have a huge warehouse here and sort of the base of operations for the global supply network for UNICEF. So UNICEF works in 190 countries around the world, working with government partners, and as I said before, also responding to emergency situations around the world. And just to give you kind of an idea of what kind of supplies that we're supplying to our government partners and in those emergencies. Just last year alone, we procured $3.38 billion worth of supplies and services for children. 173 million of that was emergency. Of course, last year was a bit of an exception because we did have the Ebola response, which was sort of unlike anything we had ever seen before. Most of what we procure is in the area of vaccines. But we also do a number of products. So everything from pencils to tents is what I like to say. Pencils is kind of, we're like the largest procurer of pencils in the world, something crazy like that, which I think is quite funny. Who knew? So why focus on product innovation, and why would UNICEF get involved in developing new products? We see that we have a sort of a unique role. The kinds of products that we need to do our work are probably a little bit different than what suppliers would sort of design otherwise. And that has to do with where and how we work. So first of all, we're operating in extremely complex environments. You can imagine that in conflict zones and in places where political situations might be unstable, it's quite difficult to get supplies into countries. Logistics is extremely difficult, and we're dealing with government partners who have limited resources, so cost is always a huge challenge for our partners. Second of all, we are working in places where there's very poor infrastructure. I should just mention that a lot of these pictures are from my own work when I was living in Uganda. And kind of fun to look back at a few of these places. This is actually a flat tire that we had somewhere in northern Uganda that kept us there for a few hours in the hot sun. But it's not easy. So when we think about delivering supplies in these kinds of conditions, we really have to have things that are quite durable. We have to think about sort of the infrastructure and the climate in those places. So we are heavily dependent on things that can be solar powered because we don't always have connection to the electricity grid and things like that really influence the design of a product. We also have really specific end user needs. So when we think about designing medical equipment, for example, the sort of end user for us, and I hope that term is sort of a known term for most of you, but the person who is actually going to be using the product at the end of the day may be someone like these community health workers. So community health workers are based at the local or village level, typically in East Africa. They don't get very much training, so they're not trained medical staff. They are volunteers from the village who have had 1 to 2 weeks, maybe a month of training on how to sort of do simple diagnosis and referrals to health centers. But they are some of the people who we refer to as our frontline workers. They're really sort of at the front lines trying to help children get better health services. But they may or may not be literate, and their access to resources is extremely limited. So designing products for them in a way that's easy for them and that really kind of requires little training is really important for us. So just to talk a little bit about how we approach product innovation, and I think this may, for those of you who are involved in sort of either the product development space, the innovation space, or design, This probably looks sort of familiar to you. Here in UNICEF Supply, we have put in place what we call a stage gate process for product development. And the idea is that we try to give a little bit of structure to this whole fancy, sexy thing everyone calls innovation. Innovation can be, I think, a term that's thrown around quite a bit, but and a lot of people, I think, use it in different ways. But for us, when we're trying to develop something new, we really think that structure is important. Of course, we're never developing anything ourselves in-house in UNICEF. We're not product designers. Most of us are not engineers, although there may be some technical backgrounds. And we're not sort of the ones who should be responsible for developing a product. But we still see the need to have a structured process for how we guide product development. And we are kind of involved in all of the phases of that development process. And what we just want to emphasize here is that any sort of new idea or new product in the beginning is going to have multiple iterations. So we want to go through lots of different design changes where we're constantly taking input from users and from our government partners and feeding that back in to try to make the product better. But ultimately, we need to create sort of an exit at the end of that development where we can ensure scale and ensure, I think, uptake of that product at the end. So linear pull versus iterative push is how we always describe this. And I'll just give a couple of examples about sort of how we move through this process. So in the very beginning, we like to focus on user research. This is a kind of a funny picture of mine from when I was working in Uganda, and I was really trying to understand the whole system for the product that I was testing. And I was taking lots and lots of feedback. I was going out and I was doing interviews with teachers, with healthcare workers, and all kinds of people that were coming into contact with the product that I was looking at. And I really just had to sit down at the end of the day and put all of these ideas on Post-it notes and try to sketch this out, really in the middle of nowhere with the cows in the background. But that's sort of what it takes, is you have to get down all the way to the field level. And this is kind of what we encourage and try to facilitate when we talk to suppliers and we talk to people who are developing the products, that you really have to come to where we are to be able to understand the complex system that we work in. Once we've done that sort of user research and really tried to understand what the need is, our next step, as I said, we never want to develop anything internally within UNICEF, is to try to communicate what our needs are to sort of external product developers. And that could be anyone from the private sector or to academia, depending on kind of the phase of development that we're looking at. We have a couple of products that are sort of very early stage technology where we are almost strictly working with academia because the science isn't even proven behind them to be able to go to an actual supplier for them, and others where suppliers are already working on similar products but really kind of just need to tweak those products to suit the UNICEF context better. So our next step is sort of communicating those needs in a way that the product developers can actually take them and create what we need. We also want to sort of be able to facilitate and really work with sort of who we would consider our end users, so local government partners, all of the sort of key stakeholders who may be NGOs and other organizations that are based in the countries where we work, and make sure that we're, as I said before, constantly getting their feedback as we're going through the product development process, and to make sure that it's going to be something that works for them. Sort of the next phase as we get further along, and so now we can kind of imagine that we might have a prototype or an early phase product that we can actually take back to the users and let them try it for a little while. And this is a really key step. As I mentioned before, we're operating in super intense conditions many of the times, so things have to be extra durable and really stand up and not, you know, need sort of little maintenance, for example, because perhaps they're going to a village that's a day away from the nearest town by road. So things like that where the sort of average conditions for a product may not hold. we have to really see how it works in the UNICEF context. So we have a couple of different products that we're sort of trialing. The one on the left is something that is used for, it's sort of rugged ICT equipment that is used for training in the field and is solar powered. And the product on the right is actually a toilet, but a little bit of a different style toilet that actually helps seal off a pit latrine that we're testing in Rwanda. And the idea there is trying to find a low-cost toilet where people can actually afford to buy it and upgrade their current toilet situation. So 2 field trials that I've actually been involved with in the last year and trying to get user feedback on those products from our beneficiaries in the field. So the final stage for UNICEF is really, and this is kind of our key role, being a UN organization and having sort of the reach that we have in 190 countries, we have the ability to sort of influence the market in some ways because we can kind of ensure that the scale is there. And through our sort of programs and our partners and our government partners that we work with, we can make sure that people are actually going to use the technology that gets created. And it's sort of this argument that we like to use with the private sector when they're thinking about developing a new product. I think a lot of people focus on numbers and how many products they can sell. And I think that's a little bit of a challenge for UNICEF because sometimes sometimes we can ensure scale in terms of numbers, but for many of our products, it's not just about that, but it's about impact on children's lives. And this is kind of an argument that we are trying to sort of make through different ways to the private sector to try to influence them to actually develop the products that we need. So in the interest of time, I'll just wrap it up there. That may be cutting it a little bit short, but I want to leave time for questions and discussion. So.
Good.
Great, thanks, guys.
You gotta love the extra tools that are provided in Google Hangouts. Thank you, Shaves.
Very good.
So when we think about your efforts, you know, the innovation team. First of all, and tell me again, how long has the Innovation Unit been around?
Well, so there's a kind of a number of innovation initiatives within UNICEF, and this particular unit that's been focusing on product innovation has been around since 2009, 2010. But it's really evolved, and it's still quite new for the organization. So we're also kind of in the process of putting in the structures and the processes in place for innovation. So I would say in kind of using the stage gate and trying to use the sort of pipeline approach to development has really been the last 2 to 3 years. So it's something new for us as well.
Okay. In that period of time, is there something that really stands out for you where you say, you know, this was a crazy success, you know, and really began to help a lot of people in you know, kind of the UNICEF organization and the UN understand how important it is to have an innovation unit?
That's a good point. I think we're still trying to prove ourselves, if I'm really honest. And I think, well, I think the other thing, especially the challenge with product innovation, is that if you want to actually develop a new product from nothing to then being available on the market, it takes much longer than people think in many cases, especially when we're talking about a lot of our things that have to go through certain regulatory processes, etc. So I think we're still a few years out. We have one product that's coming up that is a pneumonia diagnostic device. It's actually, there's a number of solutions, but we're working to kind of redesign how we diagnose pneumonia. And I think that that's going to be, I really think that it's going to be a huge success because we've been able to really tell the private sector what we need. And it's been a hugely collaborative process with both private sector, academia, as well as our other partners. So it's been I think, and that's unique. I think a lot of times organizations like the UN tend to operate in a silo, tend to sort of do their own thing, but this has been one where it's been very open, and I think it's going to show real results in a few years.
That's fantastic. I mean, when we think about trying to get, different people to talk to each other about ideas, the simply mentioning the need for solar powered tools as a part of what you do, like in the different settings you talked about, where you guys had the tire, go flat, and you're in that, you see the little solar powered thing that you put out there, for that. We had a speaker in first half of this year who showed us a thing that she put together, the solar puff, right?
Okay.
It's this cube that can flatten, and it's built out of like the plastics from recycled plastic bottles, and you can
Okay.
in kind of origami fashion, you can kind of bring it out like that. There's several solar strips on the top and LED lights under it, and so 3 hours of being in the sun can mean that you can have a light that'll last all night, and you're not getting kind of kerosene fumes in the house or anything like that, right?
Fantastic. Yeah.
So a matter of fact, there was some kind of there was some kind of an award actually from some segment of the UN, and I understand the UN is huge, right? But for what they were doing, right? We talked to somebody in South Africa just recently who has developed a fire alarm that is mesh networked. So if in an informal, like in a township, right? If all of the houses in the area each have one of these, and one of them goes off, and nobody stops it within 20 seconds, it'll make all the other ones go off, so that they can try to handle a fire before it becomes a real problem. And fires are a real problem in informal settlements.
Oh, that's super cool. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things, all of that to say that one of the things that we would certainly hope is that we would have the opportunity to work with you in terms of sharing ideas, right? So just any time where you guys have something where you think, here, this particular thing that we're developing, we want to tell its story. We'd love to talk to you about it because, with 1.2 million Rotarians around the world, there's going to be somebody who says, we need to talk to you more about that, right?
Yeah.
So I'd very much be into that. I want to kind of leave time, of course, for Cviatko and Shags, who are with us. Shags is our membership chair. Cviatko is also on our board, newest member of the eClub board. And I'm going to let them kind of pop in. Cviatko, go ahead and join us.
All right. Jessica, thanks for the great presentation. This was very, very cool. I didn't realize that the product development process has so many different stages, and there's so much analysis that takes place. This is very cool. Thanks for going over that for us. I think it's really cool that we see large development organizations focusing more and more on innovation these days with, the UNICEF Innovation Lab, I know USAID has something similar to the development lab that they're running, which also, as I understand, is fairly new. So I think it's a very cool trend to see that happening. My question for you is a bit more on the personal side. How did you end up in that kind of work?
It's a good question. It just landed in my lap. No, I think I was very lucky. I've kind of so I started in kind of public policy and development work, and I kind of always thought I wanted to do development work, and I worked for an NGO in India for some time, focusing on women's rights, and then I went back and I did my master's in public policy. But what has always interested me, and I'm the daughter of 2 psychologists, so I really have always enjoyed talking to people and trying to sort of understand, I think, what makes people tick and sort of the fundamental challenge of things. And so that's when I sort of started to look into this whole space of kind of design thinking and human-centered design. And human-centered design is kind of the principles of human-centered design. So designing for specific users, right, in specific contexts, is something that is throughout the innovation work of UNICEF. And I kind of learned a little bit more about UNICEF's work and found that out, and then found some opportunities, and I really, really got lucky to get a job doing this and sort of doing exactly what I wanted to do, which was to interview, as I say, real people doing their everyday work and trying to find out, exactly what they need and kind of how we can improve products for them to do what they do every day. So it worked out.
Thanks for the good work that you do.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, no, fantastic stuff. Shags, a comment or a question from you?
Yeah, I was just so impressed with the program. It's amazing the stuff that's going on out there. So thank you very much for sharing.
Yes, happy to share.
Yeah, the opportunity to I think get messages out about what we're doing now. I mean, it is so different, right? I mean, you think about people doing interesting things before, and before the internet, it's like, boy, you'd be lucky to find out about them, right?
Right.
And now, I mean, just any random small online Rotary Club can start telling the world about what they're learning, via the cool connections to people like you. So we appreciate that.
Oh, cool.
So I'm going to give you the last word, but before I do, I want to tell all of our members and guests, it is wonderful to have you join us. Feel free to join us every week. Every week we post a new meeting in the early morning hours of Monday, U.S. Pacific time, and that meeting is live all the way through the late evening of Sunday of the following Sunday. And what we do is we provide a 24/7 access to Rotary. And you might say, well, what's Rotary really? Rotary is about making the world a better place, and it's about people coming together with interesting ideas on how to make that happen, getting to know other folks who are passionate about seeing good things happen in their communities and providing help where it's needed. And so as you begin to think, well, that's something kind of interesting to me, by all means, kind of keep joining in. We'd love to have you come by. And when you do, we want you to let us know. If you scroll down just a little bit farther past the embedded video that is this program, you're going to find the I Attended survey. And the I Attended survey lets us know you were here, so we can send you a little note saying, thanks. We won't share that with any scummy, spammy people or anything like that. We just want to be able to thank you. And if you are a visiting Rotarian, having done that will mean that you will get an email, an automatically generated email, that you will get and then can pass on to your club secretary, which can serve as a makeup for a missed meeting at your club. Finally, at the bottom there is the Discuss section, D-I-S-Q-U-S, and you can create an account in seconds, or you can sign in with your Facebook account, or kind of whatever floats your boat on that front, and let us know what you think. So let us know what you thought of this program, let us know what you thought of the other elements of the meeting, engage people in discussion. There's room for conversation down there, right? And we love to have people sharing their ideas as we go. So we hope you will join us each and every week at SiliconValleyRotary.com, and we'll finish off with a thought from Jessica.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just want to say thanks again so much for having me present today. It was so fantastic. I think it's such a great matchup to have an organization like Rotary, which emphasizes community and service. It's not that different from our mandate at UNICEF. And I kind of just want to go back to this idea of collaborating and sort of really what pushes innovation forward is constantly sharing ideas and actually just sort of talking to people at a community level to look for sort of the innovation that might already be happening sort of right under your feet. And I think if we can kind of maintain this network and kind of maintain communication with people, then we have such a better opportunity for creating new sort of innovative ideas.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you again at SiliconValleyRotary.com.